Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Marketing is fundamental to value creation. Value is a process. It starts with customers learning what they can want, which marketing does. It communicates the value proposition. They learn what they're choosing from, and then they decide to buy, and they learn from the experience of using that brand whether or not it actually delivers on their expectations. If it does, then they'll buy again and again, creating a willingness to pay loop that can go on for a long time. This is brand as a financial asset, generating cash flows from satisfied customers over many, many years. But in the digital age, there are some new attributes of brand building and marketing that we need to know about, and we're going to learn about them today.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Our guest is Trini Amador. Trini is the greatest marketer I know because he's built brands in every category, in every medium, and every time zone. He's done it in radio marketing, he's done it in retailing, in music and film marketing. He worked for a long time in direct mail, which is the precursor of email marketing, with the same analytical disciplines about click rates and engagement and open rates and so on. He started a global brand building consultancy called BHC Consulting, and he's been retained by all the biggest global brands you know, and learned about marketing in every country and every medium and every type all over the world. He's now also building his own brand called Gracianna in the wine industry, and he's being a pioneer and a dynamic new thinker there. He has thought deeply about marketing, and he's got some new analysis and new thinking and new research about brand building in the digital age, and we're going to talk about that today. Trini, welcome back to the Value Creators Podcast.
Great to be here.
Well, you've been with us before. You've given us some fundamental tools. You're the go-to expert on everything to do with brands and brand building. You gave us the brand blueprint, which helps us define the two most important things about brand, which is relevance and differentiation. Within that, there's the brand promise, which guides action, because if you make a promise, you've got to always keep it every time. And you told us about insights, what role insights play in brand building and how to use them. Thank you for all that, and we'll provide links to those. But you're always thinking about marketing. You're immersed in that. We're in a dynamic world. The digital age has changed marketing forever. And you've come up with some new thinking about how brands thrive in the digital age. I think you call it the theory of talkability, but why don't you give us the basics of your thinking?
Well, it's really great to be with you, Hunter, as usual. You always seem to cut to the crux of the situation. And first of all, do you mind if I define talkability?
No, please do.
Okay. So our belief is that it's always the brand's responsibility to manage their brand relationships. And it's talkability. So what is talkability? It's the ability for a brand to motivate consumers to discuss and share news and experiences and events and product features and outcomes and any other knowledge and information they have about your listener's brand. Too many brands just don't understand that their brand management responsibility belongs to them, and they just float. And I think in past podcasts, we've talked about my concept of floaters and swimmers.
So floaters and swimmers, yeah, just cover it in one sentence so that people listening get it.
A floater is somebody who's just going along with the program, and a swimmer is trying to get somewhere. So they're actively managing. The starting point for talkability and the starting point for all management is brand management. You have the responsibility for understanding what it is your brand stands for, and you manage towards that. You don't just let it float. So if that's the case, do you mind if I outline kind of the three current states that are the basis of this theory?
No, please go ahead. Please guide us here.
So the first is when customers have what we refer to as an extraordinary positive encounter. So that's sort of the first area. So if you have an extraordinarily positive encounter with a brand, they feel this sense of delight and enthusiasm and sort of fulfillment. They're just really happy. These feelings create a strong emotional connection and sometimes a strong drive for people to express their satisfaction to others. So they become brand advocates, even if they just do it for a moment or one time. They're excited to share about the stories of exceptional service, outstanding products, remarkable experiences. And by sharing these positive experiences, they not only relive their own enjoyment, but they can show off how smart they are for making a good decision or demonstrate their inside track by being in the know. So these positive experiences or these shares also positively drive the brand's reputation and the brand's credibility in the eyes of other potential consumers. So the power of word of mouth magnifies this positive impact of these stories, potentially leading to increased brand and new customer awareness. That's not a big new thing, I don't think. The idea that people have an extraordinary positive encounter and then they share it. But the second thing is that sometimes customers are very unhappy and they're motivated to share those negative experiences sort of as a cathartic release, as a warning to others. And in many instances, they're even embarrassed for having made poor decisions with this brand. They failed. And because the brand failed them, they shine the light on the brand that failed them. So this perceived sort of dual failure conjures frustration and disappointment. It can lead to anger, causing them to vent their criticism and even microaggressions. So they're seeking support from others who may have had similar experiences to sort of salve the slight is what I call. So just to make you feel a little bit better. So these stories of undelivered brand promises are an early warning that have a significant impact on the brand's reputation and possibly discouraging new customers or damaging the brand's image. So these broken promises can also cause no comment at all, causing what I think of as silent sufferers, or the people who are silently aggrieved, to just never buy again. But then yet there's the experiences that meet customers' expectations that are often seen as just ordinary. So what we're doing is we've just broken this idea of talkability into three areas. One is people have extraordinary relationship or extraordinary experiences that they want to share. Two is they have a very bad experience that they want to share. And then there's sort of these people. These experiences prompt little or no reaction. They don't stand out in any remarkable way. And as a result, the customers are less inclined to share these experiences with others because they just don't perceive them as worthy of the effort. And I think that because others wouldn't be interested either. So it's sort of like, meh, my expectations were met. So there's no effort. It's almost like the brand didn't put enough effort into it. And so why should I put the effort into it? That's a very interesting area of opportunity. So particularly with negative experiences, the bystanders, the people who are seeing someone venting, they seem to want to hop on the bandwagon and share this platform to vent. They seek validation. They just want to join the collective commotion. Sometimes with these sideliners, they find it just entertaining. Brands need to reconsider how experiences impact brand reputation and the word of mouth marketing that's compared to the traditional awareness, consideration, buy, and bonding funnel. So the frame is feeling something. That is the underpinning of talkability. Because if we talk about it should be a great experience and I want to share that, the other driver is I had a bad experience and I want to share that. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. If something just kind of goes okay, there's not really a lot of emotion attached to it and there's no behavior.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. There are some insights there. I want to break down a couple of words. One is feelings. And in our theory of value, we understand that value is a feeling. It's a feeling that comes from experience. But part of that experience, to pick up on your other word, is expectations. People form an expectation. They have the experience and then they compare the experience to their expectation. Are you saying it's the brand's responsibility that if the customer has the wrong expectations and it doesn't get met, they go into that negative place that you were talking about? It's the brand's fault that they formed the wrong expectation? Help me through that.
Well, I'm not sure I want to place blame, but let's talk about it's a good question. So expectations are, I think, formed two ways. So the brand meets needs that are compared to other brands, and those other brands don't even need to be in the same category. but they can be compared to the best that provide service or products. That means that those brands that are doing very well at delivering against their promise are constantly ratcheting up the expectations to would-be consumers. What that means is that I'm a consumer just going about my day, and some of these brands out there are doing a much better job of delivering their promise than others. And so what that does is that causes me to start to understand that I'm worthy of being delivered an outstanding experience. And so what that does is it causes me to start thinking, well, why am I not getting that level of experience from these other brands that I'm currently engaging with? Consumers are constantly comparing to what they have learned from other brands and also from other consumers. So what other people tell them in person and online. So there's two expectations that are formed. One is other brands are showing you how you should be treated, and other customers or consumers are telling you how you should be treated.
Okay, so that's a big challenge. We talk about dynamics and constant change. You've really brought that to life. I just want to mark the difference between how digital marketing is typically described. I always called it the funnel. You got to generate awareness, get people's attention, their consideration, their buying, and then they bond to the brand. I've always thought that's a bit mechanical. It loses the humanity. You're proposing something that's a lot more organic. It's a lot more about feelings, yeah?
It is absolutely about emotion and developing an emotional relationship. The concept of talkability does, I think, represent a shift in the way that marketers can and should think about these customer experiences. So these are the elements that allow us to consider those differences. Okay, so first, it's the emphasis on extremes. So what we're calling the theory of talkability concept emphasizes these extreme customer experiences. They're either highly satisfying or they're highly dissatisfying. And everybody who is listening to this podcast right now or watching this podcast has had a crappy experience with someone, and they've talked about that. And everyone here has also been delighted by a experience, and they've talked about that as well. So, for example, we know that folks feel compelled to tell others when they have these terrible experiences. The person sharing feels like they're doing the other listener a favor, and frankly, if they post it online, they see that as content. Folks are looking for content, and so this happens to be an example of something that I can use to be controversial or sensational on social media. And you know what? That gets me attention. And content means that I have something to post. So the traditional funnel approach usually focuses on the step-by-step progression that you talked about of customers going through certain stages with less attention to the emotional intensity or the momentum of their experiences. That momentum is usually gauged by their engagement. So organic versus mechanical are the two words that you just used. Talkability is much more organic and spontaneous. It allows that customers naturally share their experiences when they are emotionally engaged or emotionally charged in some instances, whether it's positive or negative. However, the traditional funnel sometimes feels mechanical and linear, where customers move through these stages without considering their emotional connection to the brand, as we've talked about. Then there's the emotional connection itself. So talkability relies on the importance of emotional connections that are formed through exceptional experiences. So positive emotions like delight and fulfillment, or negative emotions like frustration and disappointment, are the key drivers of those conversations. So in contrast, the traditional funnel just doesn't fully and explicitly address the emotional perspective of these customer interactions. And then two more. One is the impact on the brand reputation. So talkability recognizes that extreme experiences can significantly impact a brand's reputation through word of mouth, through typical social media sharing and peer-to-peer reputation. The traditional funnel model mostly focuses on moving customers through these stages without the consideration or delving into the varying effects of the experiences on the consumer's brand perception. And then there's this idea of proactive issue resolution. So talkability suggests that brands should proactively address consumer pain points and resolve issues to prevent negative word of mouth. And the traditional funnel model generally doesn't give as much importance to the brand's proactive issue resolution and its role in brand reputation. And we see this proactive issue resolution all the time. We were at a restaurant the other night, and we were having a wonderful experience. The food was great. The service was wonderful. The room was great. But the people next door to us didn't seem to have a very good experience, and we couldn't understand why. The general manager walked up to them, and we were shocked at that point to hear her say, well, we're going to comp your entire meal. And honestly, I'm not sure how we felt about that. I haven't really quite processed that. We ended up paying the whole thing, and they got the whole thing back effectively. But there is proactive issue resolution. That might be more of an extreme example. But many times, you know this with Amazon, if you get something and you want to send it back, they'll say, oh, keep it. Or there's lots of little resolutions that brands do and that we're aware of. The last thing I think is the inclusion of what we refer to as the silent sufferers, or the people who feel aggrieved. So Talkability acknowledges the existence of these silent sufferers who they may not share their experiences, but it can still have a damaging effect on the brand. And this is a perspective that the traditional funnel does not even consider at all. So the theory of Talkability concept represents this more nuanced and more emotionally driven approach to understanding how customer experiences shape their brand perception and word of mouth marketing. It focuses on the significance of extreme experiences and the needs for brands to actively manage and leverage these experiences to build a strong reputation and customer lifetime value.
Yeah, we talk in theory, Trini, all the time about economic value being emotional. It's a feeling. There's nothing inherently value in things. It's all in people's minds. But you say it so much more convincingly from the marketer's standpoint. So thank you. Just to build on your anecdote, one of the things that made me think about as an innovation in modern marketing is returns policy. It used to be a huge hassle to return anything. Now it's become a central benefit that brands do. And my wife has become a huge Net-a-Porter user because it's so easy to return things if you don't like them. And that seems to me to fit your idea of proactive issue resolution. There's an innovation from that. So
absolutely.
Very eye-opening. So I've got this picture from what you said at the beginning about the delight of great service or experience and the great negatives if you have a horrible experience. It feels like there's an inverted U-curve. There's this desert in the middle, and everyday brand performance of, you might be doing a great job, as you said, doesn't get talked about. It has no talkability. It's how do we deal with that? That feels like a lot of effort for no return.
The extreme experiences are most often talked about, but the middle just isn't. In our world of extremes, though, the hypothesis is that when we are looking for everything from content that we can post, something new to talk about with our family or friends and work colleagues, that differentiates us. So we're looking for these extremes. When you add in the extremist nature of our environment, which is driving us to seek extremes, then there's something going on there. We're nearly looking for other than the middle of the road experiences. And I think this is troubling for brands that deliver day in and day out, because good enough is not nearly good enough anymore. So just as you mentioned, Hunter, it's the extreme experiences that dominate the conversations, and those moments of either exceptional satisfaction or profound dissatisfaction, or where people are naturally gravitating toward wanting to talk about, because as I say, it really differentiates them. It gives them something to talk about. They have a point of view. They're seen as being clever because they are able to justify the bad experience or showing how important they are by receiving a special experience, for example. And let me go back to my diners, by the way. Do you think the 6 of them that were sitting at the table went to work the next day or said to their family, we had a bad experience, the general manager came up and gave us a free meal? Does that positively impact the brand? It doesn't negatively impact the brand. So in a world where we're surrounded by these extremes and driven by a constant quest for unique content to share with our family and our friends and our colleagues, there's a segment of customers out there that may instinctively seek out these extraordinary experiences.
Yeah, your proactive issue resolution idea is a big one. I've just been thinking as you're talking just of casual conversations in parties or around the bar or at dinner, and someone's always looking to have what you would call an extreme anecdote, either positive or negative. They want somebody to talk about. They're never going to say, I had an expectation met the other day. That's not going to be talkable. I like it.
I was at the grocery store today and I bought a bunch of food and everything was fine. It's just not remarkable. And so
Yeah,
we're in a world now where remarkability equals talkability. And so there's something there. And so why would we as brands not be seeking to over deliver to try to drive towards talkability?
yeah. There's a guy from Harvard called Roger Martin who modestly identifies himself as the world's best consultant, as you would say. Just ask me, I'll tell you. But he said what we want as a successful brand, I think he was thinking consumer packaged goods, but it could also be B2B, is to be a habit that the consumer just thoughtlessly buys again and again and again, doesn't think about it, doesn't talk about it. And you're saying, no, that doesn't work anymore. That's the old days. You can't. Being a habit is not good enough.
Roger Martin was absolutely right at the time, but the world has changed. And so he was not wrong. But if your brand is aiming to be a habit today, it just isn't enough. I was going to say on the last question that the inclination towards the extreme is amplified by the extremist nature of our environment, which further fuels our desire for the extraordinary. So this can pose a challenge for brands that are constantly deliver reliable and dependable experiences day in and day out. So it's as if being good enough no longer suffices in this world where we're craving for the exceptional. And I know you're going to ask, what do you mean by the extremist nature of our environment? But it means that it's normal for folks to have less of a filter now, in person, online, in reviews, and Instagram, certainly on Facebook and Reddit posts. There's this implicit permission for sort of rude and even crude behavior. So some of these communities are thriving on posts from disgruntled to rude customers that are seeking to just outdo each other with their knowledge of what they consider to be less than product features or less than outcomes of a branded experience or a product or some sort of an experience. If you look at Budweiser's trans fiasco, it's an example of this. There's hundreds of thousands of others that are happening right now that are online with more negative comments being left and right. And negative comments are one cut at a time that all add up to the unkindest cut of all, which is that your habit brand is not making it into the consideration or even into your shopping cart the next time.
So I want to go back to the concept, Trini, of expectations, because it's really important to us. Some economist once said, expectations run the entire economy. What we expect to get in the future decides what we're going to buy and what we're going to buy again and so on. So we think of expectations as a prelude to the brand experience. As you said, we got the expectations, then we have the experience. We compare it with that. We compare it with the brand promise and see if it was accurate. We do all that evaluation. We do it in a dynamic way. But you're saying, hey, the whole environment of expectations is changing because of what other brands are doing. That, as you say, if they're performing excellently, the bar is just being raised for me, even though I didn't know anything about it. So tell me about that, the evaluation of the experience that way.
Well, it's interesting, in some instances, the expectation is the experience. So there are some of your listeners right now are in the business of delivering experiences. Some of them are delivering products, but at the end of the day, there is an experience that's attached to each product. So I want your listeners to think about the expectation that people have from your service or your product is an experience. So the evaluation of the experience is now the metric. So brand perceptions, especially from what I think of as historic familial relationships that people have brands. So a familial relationship is my mom bought Tide, my dad used Gillette or Old Spice, used to play a much larger role. Now customers are constantly evaluating against something that they already know or a direct competitor if they're familiar with or they've heard about one. So in brand marketing, we know that there are still only two drivers, relevance and differentiation. So that's in the brand blueprint. Relevance is this for me? And differentiation is, how different is this from something that I already know? So the theory of talkability shines a light on the experience differentiation in every way.
So you've talked about those two fundamental elements of the brand blueprint. We do a knowledge capsule every week for our listeners on our website, and we'll include that brand blueprint. We'll explain it. But with talkability as a new phenomenon, should we make changes to the brand blueprint? Is there some way we have to revise it or accommodate talkability? What's your suggestion there?
It's a good question. First of all, talkability is not a new concept or a new phenomenon. It's the very oldest. In fact, back, I can imagine on the Silk Road, they were standing there along the Bosphorus and they were saying, hey, I just, bought something for this guy and it doesn't work. And so that word ends up spreading and people end up not doing business with that person. So it's as old as time. And I don't think there is any change, Hunter, to the blueprint, the brand blueprint, because talkability is an outcome of us managing our brand, and hopefully a positive outcome from your listeners' brand's perspective, from brands that your listeners are managing, based on the unique promise that they decide to own and make and deliver. So the brand blueprint prescribes what the brand promise will be and how it's delivered and how it's communicated.
What about the speed, though, of change? On the Silk Road there, that word didn't travel very fast. It sounds like today we've got speed of change keeping up. That's at least a new dimension.
Yeah, I mean, the speed is certainly important, but the secret to keeping up with talkability is, I think it's three things, basically. One is to maintain your relevance and your differentiation. So relevance gets you into the game to even be considered to be talked about. And then differentiation is what's driving the talkability. So the differentiation is that there's something about the benefit that you're offering that causes people to talk about it. There's some extraordinary effort that you're going through that allows people or helps people to want to talk about it. The second, I think, is insights. And that is that we as brand owners and brand managers need to stay close to understanding the needs of our audience because those are constantly changing. And so an insight, as we talked about earlier, it's what motivates your customer or consumer to behave the way that they do. So as a brand owner, we need to keep our fingers on the pulse of what is causing people to behave the way that they do when it comes to us and also our competitors. And then the last, I think, is, I always talk about this, and it is honestly the most important thing. If you've done the other two things, you're managing your brand and you're staying close to your customers, then you have to manage your brand consistently. So you've got to manage your brand implies that you know that there's a unique need and that you deliver a unique benefit in the form of a promise to your target, and then you stay the course because this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, keeping the promise every time is something that you've taught us. You don't get any exceptions to that. So I used to be a bit skeptical about social media as kind of background music, Trini. The influencers tell us to post every day, and sometimes they tell us to post at 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. because that's the right thing to do. It's kind of background music. But that sounds like maybe it's more relevant now. It's kind of solving the talkability problem because I'm always in there. Is that a good thing to do, that constant background of social media talk?
Well, first, I wouldn't think of it as the talkability problem. I'm not sure if that's the right frame. I would suggest that the frame is how do you optimize the experience to attract talkability for your brand? So if posting regularly and so on is doing that, then that is the right thing. But if you're just posting just to have noise or have sort of background, that's not really helpful.
Yeah.
The idea is to attract talkability for your brand.
Yeah, good correction. So I was thinking about this the other day, watching a Heineken non-alcoholic beer ad on TV. They call it Heineken 00. And they package it in the same Heineken bottle and it's got the same kind of label. And the ad was like a beer ad. It's got beery looking guys talking to each other and slapping each other on the back in a bar and so on like that. And it seemed to me they were managing expectations that a non-alcoholic beer you might expect it to be thin or not tasty or somehow missing something. And they're saying, yeah, no, it's all Heineken. It's the same great Heineken, just 00, which is a kind of a manly beery name. So I hear guys talking about non-alcoholic beer these days, that it's much better than it used to be, and it's perfectly acceptable. So is that an example of managing talkability, do you think?
I think it is a great example of that. And it always comes down to understanding the needs of your target customer. So what does the consumer need in this instance? So does this beer consumer need what we'll call a beery product, to fit in with other guys, except that the missing part is the alcohol. Hear the insight that there's a segment of guys who need to fit in, and they need to maybe hold the same looking beer as the others to maintain fitting in. Or did Heineken miss the mark by making a unique product, which is zero alcohol, and they ended up packaging it just like everything else, which ends up not differentiating the target at all? So, beer is a very complicated product category, as you would know, but the answer is really it depends on the target's needs.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's subtle, and you've got to be accurate with your insights. Another brand in similar kind of category we had in our venture capital portfolio some time ago was Crave Beef Jerky. So when I say beef jerky, the expectations are, kind of salty and
Dry.
Negative maybe. But this was prepared by a chef, and it had really exotic flavors like Cabernet Sauvignon and Orange Zing and so on like that. It attracted athletes who needed a big protein fix, and it became very popular with those kinds of people. So again, they changed the talkability of beef jerky. Am I thinking right?
Absolutely.
Well, good. So one more thing about experience. I see a lot of these surveys on the internet that ask me to rate the experience. Did you have a good experience? And, give it 5 stars. Is that good practice? Should all the brands be doing that? Is it accurate? Is it helpful?
Well, I think the idea of getting feedback from your customers is very, very important. Very important. So what they call Net Promoter Score, NPS, it's a good idea. It's a snapshot of sentiment in the moment. It's a good barometer of emotions in the moment. I think so overall, it's a good metric to make decisions about how you're doing. But if in many instances in our businesses, depending on if your customers or if the folks who are listening are in the restaurant business or we're in many other types of businesses, there are services that are attracting reviews for your business. So we would encourage your listeners to be ensuring that they're getting Google reviews or Yelp reviews, allowing folks to post on OpenTable or other sorts of venues, TripAdvisor, for metrics. Because what it does is it also keeps you honest that you're delivering the level of service that you say you are.
So let's talk a little bit, Trini, about putting this into practice. You're the founder and proprietor of Gracianna, which is a wine brand that you started from scratch up in Sonoma, where you are, and is a family business. You got family members involved in it now. You have a lot of talkability. It seems like an outside observer. You enter a lot of shows and tasting contests. You get gold medals to talk about. Your presence there generates conversation. You personally are in the tasting room talking to your customers. Your wife makes great cookbooks, and you market those. You have a newsletter. You've always got things that people can talk about. You bring the winemaker to winemaker dinners. So how do you get talkability right in your industry where there's such a lot of competition of many brands? There's prestigious brand owners and just a lot of talk. So tell us of what you've learned over more than a decade now of running Gracianna.
Well, thank you so much for the shout out, Hunter. So Gracianna Winery is in Healdsburg. We're in Sonoma County and surely making collectible world-class wine. And it's also a hotbed of innovation excellence. So that means we're constantly and consistently continuing the conversation with our guests, and we're obsessively delivering the brand promise, raising the bar on delivering that. So we found that there is this anticipated experience that we have to live up to every time. So let me say that again. There is an anticipated experience that we need to live up to. So that is our everyday challenge. While we always seek to delight guests or over deliver what their expectation is. It's because, as I talked about a minute ago, there just is no do-over to deliver the experience or the promise.
Where does that anticipation of experience come from, Trini? Does it come from visitors who've gone to Gracianna and said, this is terrific, you really got to try it? Or does it come from a different kind of expectation, which was formed over in Napa Valley, which is kind of the Las Vegas of wine, and they come to you and they've got a different kind of anticipated experience? What have you learned about the anticipated experience?
So the anticipation comes from two sources. One, it's reviews that they've read about, and the other is it's just good old fashioned word of mouth. So someone told me. So referrals play a very big part in our business. I can't tell you how many times somebody walks into the tasting room or buys wine online and says, someone told me, my friend told me, my boss told me, my coworker told me, my family told me. And the anticipation also comes from someone who may try our wine at a party in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. It's a fabulous experience with the wine. And so that sets the bar for what their expectation is.
Yeah. Well, you've done a fantastic job. Do you have metrics, elements of talkability, or these other parts of engagement that you can track?
Absolutely. So we track lots of streams of behaviors. So the bottom line is revenue at the end of the day, as you know. So that's the primary metric is, are you profitable? But we also have sentiment scores. There's engagement. There's reviews that play large roles. We talked about a minute ago, and referrals certainly are very, very important as well.
Yeah. We try to link revenue directly to experience through what we call willingness to pay. So you've gone through this valuation cycle, you've got your expectations, you're willing to pay for that. And then ideally, if you have a good experience, you're willing to pay for it again. And now I'm going to add, you're willing to talk about it. So the revenue is a direct tracker, but it's still a feeling. It's willingness to pay.
Absolutely. That is a emotional perspective. And so, too many folks and folks that are listening right here, they think that they're in the plumbing business, or they think they're in the landscaping business, or they think that they're in the product business, and they're not. You are in the experience business. And at the end of the day, I'll tell you what, there's a young guy that we know in Sonoma County. He's a landscape contractor. Okay. He goes in and makes your yard look great, but he understands that at the end of the day, experience of just interacting with him drives value. I'm not sure if this sounds familiar to anybody who's listening, but if you call a contractor, a lot of times they just don't call you back. You just don't hear from people. They don't, communicate very well or very regularly. This guy will respond to a text. He'll call you back. He'll email you 24 hours a day. So how's that for differentiation?
Yeah.
How's that for talkability? I'm sitting here talking about this right now because I'm so impressed with this guy.
Right. It's an extreme experience compared with everybody else, right?
Exactly. And that's how you get to talkability, Hunter.
Yeah, good. Well, Trini, thank you so much. This has been really, really valuable. We'll summarize it on the website. We'll try and capture the key parts. We'll link to the brand blueprint and the other elements of that. Just tell people again where they can find Gracianna and where they can reach you and how to be part of the talkability of Gracianna.
Well, first, I just want to put a shout out to the Gracianna team, because this is a team of world-class winemakers, of world-class hospitality deliverers. It is a world-class team of people who run the finance organization behind the scenes. There's also, we have a great person who works in operations and brand marketing who you know very well, who helps us drive this. And, it's an entire group of people who are pulling together to deliver a world-class hospitality experience of delighting people every day. You can find us at Gracianna.com. It's Gracianna. And Gracianna wines are for people who have something to be grateful for, because that's what my great-grandmother used to talk a lot about when I was a kid. That's where you can find us, and it's world-class wine and an intimate, friendly experience when you come over and see us.
Great. Well, Trini, thanks again. You've brought us great knowledge, great insights. I'm thinking differently about brands and marketing after talking to you than I did before, and hopefully everybody who's listening will take that away as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Hunter. Always great to see you.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.